Good morning, everybody. My name is Jay. I am the youth training coordinator here at Families Together in New York State. And today I'm going to be hosting this technical assistance call, Navigating Youth Peer Advocate Ethical Challenges. I am using a second screen, so if you could just be patient with me while I change slides and, give you the information from all of the slides. Okay. So my name's Jay Culkin, as I already said. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm a youth peer advocate with lived experience as a youth in the mental health system. So I've been a YPA in the community setting, residential setting, and the clinical setting so far. And I'd like to invite you to put an introduction in the chat. So your name, pronouns, your role, the county that you work in, or just the general sort of area. And share one quality that you look for in a friend. I'm going to drop my own sort of to give you an example. I'm going to put that in the chat just so you sort of have the format. And I'll give you a minute or two to do that. And as we move forward, please feel free to put those things in the chat as we go along. Okay. So here are some of the things that we're going to be going over today. This is the agenda. So we're going to have an overview of the Youth Peer Advocate Code of Ethics. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on them because we're really focusing on just how to address the challenges rather than like the challenges themselves. We do have access to the Youth Peer Advocate Code of Ethics, which I will ask to not put in the chat yet, Zaquana, but if you could put in the chat a little bit later, I'll let you know when. There's a reason I'm saying not to do it right now, and you'll see that in a moment. We're going to go over the ethical challenges and pitfalls. We're going to go through addressing, avoiding, and avoiding ethical challenges, and then we're going to go through how to handle code of ethics violations very briefly, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end, and go into this is why I said we're not going to share it just yet, because we're going to play a quick sort of game. It's called brownie points. Right. So how many code of ethics categories can you name? Put as many categories of ethical standards in the code of ethics that you can remember. Put them in the chat one at a time. If you're the first to put it in the chat, you get a point for it. So whoever gets the most brownie points wins. So your prize is bragging rights. That's all I've got for you. Sorry. The hint is there are 13 categories. So you can actually, the Code of Ethics has those categories listed A through M. No cheating. This is an honor system. I believe in you guys. So, like I said, just put it in the chat, kind of like a waterfall, and we'll keep track of who says what and who wins. And if you can't remember, that's okay. It's just for the fun of it. Okay, that's 1 point for Peyton, 1 point for Emma, 1 point for Unique. Self-driven care. I'm gonna say that's probably I, word for word, self-driven care is not part of it, but I'm gonna say that was probably empowerment and self-direction, which is one of them. So if you're taking notes, Aquana, I'd say give that to Peyton. Personal relationships, yep, that's one to Emma. Okay, respect for diversity. Do we have that already? No. All right, so that's one for Nafisa, and let me know if that was pronounced correctly or not. Um, commitment to partnership. Was that already said? I think. No, I don't think that was. Well, okay. Okay. Confidentiality. Yeah, that was not said yet, so we'll give that to Emma. Conflict of interest. Was that already said? Conflict with interest was already said by Emma, so that was Emma's point. I still appreciate putting it in there, though. Access to records. I was just thinking that one. I'm like, how am I going to give them a hint for that? Yes, yes, yes. So that's a point for Peyton. I see ethical integrity from Peyton a little while ago. I don't know if I read that one out. Informed consent. Okay, if that wasn't already said, give that to Emma. Responsibilities when certified. Yes. It is. I'm looking at the answer key here. It is credentialed, not certified, but really, what's the difference? I'm just giving you the word for word. It's very similar. So, um, I think did we get through all of them? I think we got through pretty much all of them. What was that? Um, Zaquana, were all of them covered?
Hold on, I'm looking right now.
Okay, Nafisa said consent. I think we already did. Somebody
We
already
did,
got informed consent.
yeah, someone said it.
Were there any that weren't said yet? I'm looking. Okay, somebody said competence already. I'm looking at that. Yep.
We
Uh,
do have one more.
yeah, actually, you're right. We do have one more, and I think it was the letter L on Code of Ethics. Hmm. Ah, there we go. Integrity. Yes, which is confusing because there's an ethical integrity and an integrity, but I believe that was the last one, Pete. I think that's it, right? We're good?
Yes, and Emma and Peyton are neck and neck with 4 points each.
Ah, okay. So Emma, you said Emma and Peyton?
Yes.
Brownie points. You get bragging rights. You win. The two of you. So now you can go back to your workplace and you can tell your coworkers and supervisors, I actually won bragging rights, so I'm going to brag for the rest of the day. I hope that that was a somewhat enjoyable experience. Thank you for bearing with me. Um, here is the answer key. Yep. So this is if you go through the code of ethics, which Zaquani, you could put that in at any point whenever you are able to upload it. So these are the different points of the code of ethics. So there's commitment to youth and young adults, empowerment and self-determination, respect for diversity, competence as a youth peer advocate, ethical integrity, informed consent, access to records. That one's a big one for me. That's my favorite. Confidentiality and privacy, conflicts of interest, personal relationships, commitment to partnership, integrity, and responsibilities when credentialed. Like I said, we're not going to go through each one and have big discussions about each one of them. If you have not gone through it yet, when you go through the 4-day advanced training, there's going to be a lot more conversation about it. And if you have done the provisional level 1 and level 2 trainings from the CTAC website, there's a little bit about it as well. And since it's in the chat, you could review it, on your own time as well. So now that we have kind of done a little bit of review, just an overview of what the Code of Ethics is, I wanted to ask, and you could put it in the chat or you could unmute, whatever you're more comfortable with. What does the Code of Ethics mean to you? So what comes up for you when you read them? So like as you were going through, all these different things, and I can go back, to the previous slide as well. Like what are the things that you thought of, things that come up in your work, things that you think of as you're doing your work. And if you could change anything, add anything, benefits, challenges, however you want to take this, just whatever thoughts come up for you. So Peyton says, everyone's safe and keeps focus on the task at hand to support the youth and family. All right. So I heard focus, like staying sort of within that role. So I appreciate that. I think that is a big part of the Code of Ethics. Safety. Thank you, Maury, for sure. It is a big part of it, safety and wellness of the youth peer advocate. Unique says outlined guide for youth peer advocates. Yeah, it's good to have something to kind of direct us, in our work. And I would even say like, even just as a tool for supervision, like discussing what you've been doing with youth peer advocates so far and being able to reference the code of ethics to be able to really like figure out with your supervisor, how am I doing, what I need to improve on. Does anybody else have any? Creates a baseline to, yeah, Emma says creates a baseline to follow and how to safely and appropriately support youth that you're supporting. Yep. Does anybody have anything that they would change or add? Second screen almost fell here, sorry. No worries, Peyton. One of the questions on here that I am especially curious about, and this is why, we have the technical assistance training. This was actually one of the most popular topics in our survey, when trying to figure out what we needed to do for 2025. This was, I think, either first or second in most wanted. So one of the things I'm most curious about for the purposes of just continuing to go through this technical assistance training, what are the challenges that you've faced so far, or that you are concerned you might face? I will say, and I will share because I that maybe will get kind of the thoughts going on this. I will share that one of the things that I was concerned about, when I became a youth peer advocate, was access to records. Um, which again, that's a big one. That's my favorite one. Because that can be a big point of contention with clinicians, right? Like sometimes clinicians are like, oh, they don't need to see that. Oh no, that's going to hinder their progress if they look at that. That might make them more upset. So I really went into it kind of being like, and how do I know what they actually really do have access to? Their youth, I'm sure that there are some things that they can't access, or that, parents, or caregivers, can decide whether or not they can access them, whatever. I always kind of wondered about those intricacies. So that was a challenge that came up for me. Does anybody have any other challenges? Yeah, Shakira shared keeping healthy boundaries while still maintaining a trusted stance from the youth. So real. That's a huge one. Um, I do have, and Zaquana, if you could look for it and put it in the chat, I do have a previous technical assistance call from YouTube. If you go on the Families Together uh, YouTube page. There is a Creating Healthy Boundaries presentation that I did as a previous technical assistance call. But that's so true. I can see, especially, people that don't have as much like general working experience or experience working with others, just like your interactions on a day-to-day basis. Now I have to learn a whole new type of interaction, and trust is important. Keeping trust is very important. Maintaining that balance is super important. Um, all right, Emma says, I'd say the conflicts of interest part is a challenge, especially in a rural area. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm in the rural area I'm in. It's very common to run into people you know personally in your work, and that can be difficult to navigate. I actually do mention that, what you were mentioning. I do mention that later in the training, so I appreciate you bringing that up now, getting that head start. Second. Okay. Any final thoughts before we move forward? All right, I'm gonna move forward with this. Okay. All right, and Zaquana just put in the chat the Creating Healthy Boundaries previous technical assistance call. All right, so common challenges and pitfalls. The proximity in age. As I was kind of alluding to previously, some of the youth peer advocates, I mean, you could be 18, 19, 20 years old, and it doesn't take away from your ability to be a youth peer advocate, but you do have maybe a closer proximity in age to maybe somebody who's 16, right? So it could make it even more difficult than maybe somebody who's 28, 29, or 30 and working with a 14-year-old, where there really is like kind of this, all right, I don't have that same proximity to age with the youth. I remember what it's like. I'm still young enough to, kind of make those connections, but there's an understanding that this is a youth and I'm an adult. And now you have somebody who's super close in age. You could potentially be friends, outside of work. What do I do about that type of thing? So that's a common challenge that people might run into. Proximity and experience. Over relating to the youth can make it really difficult to kind of maintain those healthy boundaries, keep to the code of ethics. If you were in a residential facility, let's say, for example, and you dealt with certain challenges in this residential facility, you had a similar diagnosis or similar symptoms, and then you are in a residential setting with a youth who has those exact same challenges or very similar challenges, similar symptoms, similar interactions with staff. You're over relating, a little bit. You're oh my gosh, I feel like I know what this youth would want because it was my experience too. So that can be a challenge there. And then, as I think was it Peyton or Emma? I'm so sorry. One of you had said it was Emma. One of you had said small community, rural community. There's an overlap in circles. It kind of even, I would say, exacerbates that proximity and age challenge, right? Because okay, I live in a rural area. There's very few people here. And that kid went to my high school at the same time as me, right? Like, oh my gosh, that person was in ninth grade while I was in 12th grade, and now I'm the youth advocate for this person, right? Like, I don't know, that's a very, specific example, but it's something that could happen. Um, the reason for becoming a youth peer advocate, some people come into the youth peer advocate field because they have the lived experience and they might as well. Some people come into it with an extreme amount of passion, with a sense of I want to, do for the youth something that I didn't get when I was, that age as well. That could lead to things like burnout, compassion fatigue, that over relating and getting too involved and crossing those ethics and boundaries because you're so dedicated to the work or because you're like so, concerned about giving this youth something that you didn't have. Um, Maybe, you take, sort of blindly take the youth side or something like that. Oh, I wish that I had been listened to. This kid's not being listened to, da da da. And then it turns out that the clinician, maybe they didn't communicate it well, or maybe there's, they're not listening fully to the youth, but maybe there's a middle ground that you're not seeing, because of just the over relation to the experience. Access to training, right? Some agencies may have a very robust youth peer advocate and family peer advocate program. So they have tons of access to training all the time. They have mentorship programs. I came from an agency that had a mentorship program, on a pilot basis. You have multiple different youth peer advocates that have been youth peer advocates for a while, or people in your department. I think we actually, at the supervisor cafe, we actually had a supervisor that was a youth peer advocate themselves previously. So experiences like that are great. You have lots of training. You have lots of people to draw back on. And then you have agencies that you are like the only YPA. And your supervisor doesn't know anything about YPAs. And it's a totally new program. You're the first YPA they ever had. So they have no idea where to access training for you or where to direct you for training. They say, oh, you're on your own. So that could be another challenge. Role clarity within the agency, similarly enough, supervisor doesn't understand, staff don't understand. They're putting you in situations that you're not supposed to be. And then prioritizing intention over impact. This is a big one. Some of you may, know that sort of saying of like impact over intent, intent over impact. Kind of going into the work with this, like, I am doing good work. I know I'm coming in here with good intentions. I know I'm coming in here with a good heart. I want to help. I want to help. I want to help. But reframing that as like, how is this going to affect the youth, and really like intentionally going through everything that you're, doing with the youth, everything that you're saying with the youth, thinking forward too. What is going to be the impact on this youth? If you're thinking about, let's say, like certain, trying to look at the answer key and try to give you a little bit of like okay. Um, let's say access to records. It's one that I kind of can always draw back on. Access to records. Um, the intention of this youth gets really upset when they're stigmatized, when they're, seeing their diagnosis, they don't agree with their diagnosis. Maybe I'll just avoid. I'll try to stall them getting, talking to the doctor, and being able to talk about their diagnosis and being able to access their records. Maybe I'll kind of take the care manager's side on this a little bit. And the intention is, I really wanted to, I really just wanted to protect this youth. But now, what is that youth going to carry with them when they get older and they're old enough to be a youth care advocate, and they leave these youth serving systems, and they're like, even the person that I trusted to be my advocate, to understand my experience, was so worried about my reaction, just like everybody else, right? So that's just, I mean, that's a pretty specific example, like I said, but these are the types of things that we try to be mindful of when we're talking about code of ethics. So I've talked so much about challenges, about pitfalls, about difficulties, and now comes the good part, the part where we're like, now how do we navigate it, right? So these are some resources that you can utilize for, remedy, for trying to, address these challenges, or trying to stop the challenges before they even happen. Families together events. There's technical assistance calls, and there's youth peer meetings. Those are, a few of them that, there's also bigger ones. There's University of Youth Power. There's, the upcoming conference. There's all these different things, but those are the sort of regular families together events that you can take advantage of and kind of learn a little bit more about. This is one of them, right? So that might be a place, youth peer meetings, that might be a place where you can process with youth power staff and other youth peer advocates, other youth, like really like kind of processing, what are the challenges that I had as a youth peer advocate on the job in the last week, and what am I going to do moving forward? Right. And then you have a bunch of youth peer advocates, youth staff that can all give you input, they can all give you insight, and TA calls, similar thing. I try to run, these TA calls in a way that we have a Q&A at the end, so that people can kind of express themselves, say, oh, you didn't cover this. I kind of want to learn a little bit more about this. Or, um, I resonated with what you mentioned here. Can you tell me more about it? So those are some of those regular events that you can go to address code of ethics issues. Robust training. Um, there are some that, are pretty obvious. You may know, like the online modules and the 4-day advanced training. Those are things that are part of the credentialing process. So a lot of us know about them already. It's in that 6-step form that you might have seen before on the website. But some additional training resources that kind of are continuing education that maybe, you can bring up to your supervisor and say, this is something that I'd like to take. So peer tac is one of them. There's a lot of webinars. Right now, my understanding is a lot of their focus is on supervisor related things, but there are also other, curated articles and resources that you could use. You could even, a part of the remedy might be giving your supervisor the peer tac website and saying, there's a webinar on, supporting youth peer advocates. I'm the first youth peer advocate. Maybe take a look at this. That might be the because then you and the supervisor can collaborate a little bit better on what's my role here, and that's addressing a pretty big code of ethics challenge that we addressed in the last slide. CTAC. Similar, that is another, webinar heavy, content heavy type of resource that you can utilize. And then APS, that stands for Academy of Peer Services. I apologize, I should have spelled that out. But Academy of Peer Services, it's actually where, for those of you that, want to continue in the peer field or are getting a little older and want to become a New York certified peer specialist, that's actually where you do your training for that. But there's a lot of continuing education, just presentations in general, trainings in general that you might want to take. Maybe it's just to explore, your career option after being a youth advocate, but maybe it's something that really interests you or addresses something like that. So some of those, pitfalls, those challenges, maybe you want to learn more about, just there's so many. I've been on the Academy of Peer Services. There's so many continuing education. You might want to learn more about LGBTQ or about, racism in the peer world, or, how to deal with talking about suicide as a peer. We're not crisis providers. Youth advocates should never be dealing with crisis, but maybe just like, an understanding of, how can that affect youth peer advocates? What can I do as a peer to kind of like divert, and provide resources. So those are all very content heavy sort of resources. You're also going to need continuing education to keep your youth peer advocate credential, over time. If you have a professional credential, you still need to do continuing education credits to hold it. So if you are 19 and you finished your 600 hours and you did your 4-day training and you've applied for your professional credential, imagine how many years that is of continuing education that you're going to have to do. CTAC, PeerTAC, Academy of Peer Services has so many things that you can spread out over the course of your career and really make this like a really big part of your career. Strong intentional supervision with trained supervisors. So I provided the peer tac information before. They have a lot of stuff for supervisors, but also the Supervisor Experience Cafe. We have that here at Families Together. So it's just a time for supervisors to come together and talk. So sometimes a supervisor might respond really well to other supervisors maybe a little bit better than like let's say like you just providing kind of a webinar. Like, okay, here's a webinar that I saw on PeerTech. It talks about supervising, and they're still, the supervisor still might be like, well, okay, well, I don't have a whole lot of real world examples. Okay, so the supervisor cafe, right? And they go and they talk to other supervisors. They get a little bit more like nuanced and in-depth information, and then they come back to you, and you have really good intentional supervision with a supervisor that's really well trained to deal with, advocate code of ethics, family peer advocate, certified peer specialist, whatever, it may be. Clear boundary setting, doing it from the get-go, making sure that, I mean, you might even, honestly, you might even want to share the code of ethics with the youth you're working with so that they know ahead of time. It kind of goes into informed consent in a way. It even fulfills a piece of the code of ethics of just being able to be like, this is my role. This is what my role is. These are the things that I need to do to ethically maintain, my work for you as a youth peer advocate. So being familiar with the code of ethics, making sure that the people that you work with, the youth, the families, care manager, direct staff, supervisors, whoever it is, that they are very clear on what your boundaries are as a youth peer advocate. And again, you can look at that previous TA call. I do go over kind of like a plan, like an actual concrete plan that you can, write down, like, how you want to handle certain, boundaries and different things to consider. So, I do recommend that, not just because I did it, but because I think, it's a really good and relevant thing, for, navigating those code of ethics challenges. Having a list of resources ready so that when, I had mentioned earlier, we are not crisis providers. We don't respond to crises. Okay. So here's you know, um, this list of phone numbers that you can call or text, or websites that you can go to talk to somebody, uh, oh, the clinic that you go to actually has a crisis number. I know you didn't know about that previously, but this is actually the phone number for the clinic. Let me know how things go if you end up calling them. We'll talk about it and we'll debrief it. So having those things ahead of time so that you don't even have to deal with it. What sort of the messiness of like, I don't know what to do. I want to help them. I want to be able to give them that like support, and I don't know what to. List of resources. You got it right in your back pocket. And then the prioritizing impact over intention. I went over that a lot when we were sorry. I went over that a lot when we were on the last slide, so I'm not going to get too deep into it, but just making sure that you're considering that impact when you're going into this youth so that you don't violate the code of ethics. Okay. All right. So before we start, kind of going over some example scenarios, I'd like to have two volunteers if possible. I'm going to put a short scenario description, and you're going to respond with a resource for remedy, and what you think would be helpful to help you through that scenario, like if you were that youth peer advocate. So there's no set right answers. We're just considering what would be helpful and why. Everybody might have a different response. Maybe some people are like, okay, well, I have a really good supervisor. I don't need to worry about that. But I haven't really gone through a lot of training. I got to brush up on things. I did the 4-day training like, 8 months ago. I don't remember too much about it. Like I gotta really, get the wheels spinning. Okay. So look into something else, right? The prize will be my eternal gratitude for you volunteering and some very cool affirmations for your volunteerism because it is volunteering, it's optional, but I would really appreciate it. Um, and I will give an example, so you're not just kind of going into a blind trying to figure out, I will give you an example of a scenario and how I'm going to respond to the scenario. So would anybody like to volunteer? Brave people. Would it be better if I went through the examples so that you know what you're getting yourselves into?
We can
Or
do
were you-
that.
I think that might be best. Okay. Never fear. Okay. Here's the example scenario. You work in a community setting. The youth you work with has been asking to sit with you and their care manager to review their psychosocial evaluation so that they can ask questions and understand more. The care manager says, he doesn't need to access that. It'll just make him worry. It's okay. Right? So now, and each slide will have this, so this will be up for you. It's from the last slide. The toolbox. So what are you going to use? You could just pick it. Like you don't have to really like think too much about it. Come up with an open-ended question. You can add some open-ended stuff, but just you could pick from what's right there. If you think of something that's not there, though, awesome, because I'll add it to the next training. But so I'm going to look at the toolbox and then really think about it, right? And this is the response that I picked. All right, so I'm worried about access to records. This youth does not have access to records. They're being restricted from access to records. Empowerment and self-determination, they're not being empowered. They're not determining it for themselves. Somebody is determining for it. And commitment to youth and young adults. I'm committed to that youth at that point. That's my commitment. That's where my heart is. So some possible remedies. I might review the credentialing materials. I might have some supervisor conversations. I might go to a TA call, some technical assistance. Oh, Jay, the youth training coordinator, is giving a technical assistance call on access to records. I'll go to that TA call that I see next month. Okay. I might debrief with maybe staff at the youth peer meetings. I might bring this up at a youth peer meeting. I was actually just at the last youth peer meeting, and we had somebody that kind of stayed back and had a really good conversation about something that had occurred in their work as a youth peer advocate, and we were able to give a lot of guidance. I was really proud of that, and I was really proud to see that person do that. And I encourage as many of you that need to do that. And then discussing the impact. These are the things that I chose to do. There's so many other things that y'all can do. And as volunteers, I'm not asking you to point out the specific violation risks. That was just kind of my way of, helping putting these things into perspective. But really, just choose from the toolbox is what I'm really getting at. Or add something to the toolbox. So do I have any volunteers now that I have maybe gone through it a little bit more? Is it Carolina or Carolina? I just want to make sure. Because I see that you volunteered, and I'm eternally grateful for you forever.
It's okay. I actually go by Angel.
Oh, okay, I'm
I
sorry.
just couldn't switch. No, it's okay. I couldn't switch it on the thing. I didn't know how, so I just left it.
All right. So
Thank
Angel,
you. Yeah.
thank you for your bravery. Do I have anybody else, or maybe let Angel go? Ah, yes. Okay. So okay, we have Angel and then we have Emma. All right. So Angel, you'll take the first one.
Oh, there's a fish market, I mean, a fish restaurant.
So I'll read out the scenario. You work in a residential setting. Several days a week, you come in, and a direct care staff member runs to you and says, "Oh, awesome, you're here. Darcy is freaking out again. You're the only one who seems to know how to calm her down. Come with me." What do you do? Or not, maybe not what you do in the moment, but what do you do to address either if you're going back after dealing with the crisis and you're like, all right, I gotta do something about this. What would you use?
12.
Well, I think
What
that.
time did you go on?
Sorry, I'm a bit
Oh, you
nervous.
gotta be back. Oh.
No wrong answers, it's fine.
I think it would be good for them to like make sure that they've used like the techniques like such as like conversating, because the fact that they said it's freaking out just is kind of, it's really inappropriate. Like their comment was inappropriate. So I would suggest having some informative training on like, you know, reframing their wording and like how to have like more empowering like, you know, there's like a different way to say things and it's not that way. And people can be very misunderstood. So I would suggest that they either A, check in with their supervisor because that's not really appropriate, or do a training. And I think I would also try to set like a clear boundary and like, you know, every time there's a crisis, we have techniques and things and making sure that they're being properly utilized and that like you kind of just can't like drag me whenever you feel like it just because it's like it's not proper a way to do things, it's not how you communicate with someone. And even maybe like including them with the situation and like showing them as an example of like how to de-escalate and what works with the youth, and like reminding them like they have coping skills and they have things that do work for them. But yeah.
I think that was, I'm like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Those were some really great points. Like, I'm gonna just kind of summarize what I heard from you and kind of like the next steps that I hear you talking about. I mean, first of all, you know, the tool in the toolbox, if we're talking about the toolbox, you're talking about strong intentional supervision with trained supervisors, right? Getting to a point where you can say to your supervisor, you know, that was not appropriate, and trusting that supervisor to, like you said, suggesting additional training, you know, collaborating with you to, you know, learn a little bit more about language that's more appropriate, especially as somebody who has lived experience and can really see it from a very specific perspective. So already, you know, you are kind of checking off that commitment to partnership, the commitment to youth and young adults. You took that as the staff needs more training and understanding instead of the staff is horrible. How dare you? You took it from a different you know, that almost like that partnership perspective. You want it to be, you know, good for the youth. We're partnering together for the youth. So that was awesome. You know, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I want to say, oh, there was something else that I was thinking about that you had said. Um, Let me think. What was it? Oh, the boundaries. Yes, that's right. So having that clear boundary setting, that is a really good way to use. If you go on, you know, my, not to plug myself over and over again, but if you go on my you know, boundary setting TA call and taking those concrete steps, and now that is a perfect opportunity to utilize it. What am I going to do to make sure that these staff do not cross my boundary as a youth peer advocate? You are not a direct care staff, right? They shouldn't be asking you to do things like, for example, you know, TCI or like the, you know, the physical interventions. They should not be asking you to do those trainings. You're not expected to do those things. Those are not part of your role. And so having those clear boundaries set right from the start, having an action plan on what you're going to do if those boundaries keep getting crossed, is really important for keeping the code of ethics. So thank you, Angel. I know you said you were nervous, but you actually did really, really freaking awesome. So thank you. My eternal gratitude. So did you have anything else to add or any other final thoughts? Or does anybody have any feedback maybe for Angel, agreements, additional things?
I didn't have like any last thoughts, but thank you.
Of course, no, that's perfect. I so appreciate it. I'm gonna move forward then to, and if anybody has any, like I said, any good affirmations, you know, or suggestions, you can put it in the chat. All right, Emma. I think was it Emma? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Emma was the one that. Yes. No. Yes. Okay. So, oh, Angel, your question: do youth peer advocates do crisis interventions with clinical staff? I work in a clinical environment. Um, you're not supposed to be involved in crisis interventions. You're not supposed to be involved in that. You can be involved in crisis debrief. You could be involved at that, you know, when the crisis is over and how did it go and what do you want to do differently and what do you want to do to prevent, you know, an additional crisis. You can talk to staff about how it went, but you should not be involved in the crisis itself. um, it's not good for you. It's not good for and me saying that, and that's the thing. That's why we're having these trainings. Is me saying that is not to say like if you have done it, how dare you? But like it's more of me saying like that's something that the program at large has to work on and they have to be informed about because they should be protecting again you as the youth career advocate and protecting the fidelity and the quality of care that they provide. Does that answer the question? I do mediation with families after crisis occurs. Yes. So that is that if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, that is an example of like how you can be involved in that crisis intervention type of thing. You just aren't supposed to be in the moment, you know, de-escalating the crisis. Obviously, if you're having a crisis right in front of you, and you can't at that moment, like you have to, the agency, that you work for, and you all have to kind of come together as a team to kind of figure out how you're going to deal with that as it comes. But you should not be pulled into a crisis. So that's my input on that. And like I said, if you, I really appreciate that you're bringing these things up now because, like I said, better to bring them up now than, have that issue later and then processing it with other youth peer advocates and staff of families together before it actually becomes an issue in the real the work that we do on boots on the ground type thing. All right, so. I think it was Emma. All right. So Emma, are you ready for scenario 2 now that you had a really awesome example?
I am ready, yes.
Thank you. Awesome. All right. So scenario 2, you work in a clinical setting. The clinical supervisor is always asking you to run clerical errands between meetings with the youth. So they're making you like, answer phone calls and stuff like that. The therapists and psychiatrists are always praising you for being a good helper. When a new youth comes in for an intake assessment and asks for a youth peer advocate, you're told that a clinician can just do it because you are needed on the phones. So what are you going to do? What is your toolbox?
So for this, there would be a lot of conversations with boundaries. I would suggest maybe conversations with your supervisor and they can get together with well, I mean if it's the same supervisor, whatever, but have a conversation with the supervisors about how my role as a youth peer advocate isn't to be an office assistant. Um
Mm-hmm.
and just have those conversations about that. That's not what I'm here to do. And then for the part at the end, where it says that you are told that a clinician can just do it, that's another thing where it would be a conversation about boundaries and all of that kind of stuff because um, the youth specifically requested a YPA, and a clinician coming in is a completely different interaction than they would have with a YPA. So that's kind of dismissing the youth's wants and needs as well. So yeah, lots of talks on boundaries, some trainings on the role of what a YPA is, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I am seeing, you again, similar to the last scenario, and what Angel was talking about, the commitment to the youth and the young adults. You also competence as a youth peer advocate. You in that moment you said I'm going to advocate for the fact that the youth asked for a YPA. So as the youth peer advocate, that's your role, not to be on the phones, right? So you're totally right with that. Like, and it having a conversation with the supervisor again, the supervisor good resource supervisors, right? Like, like you said, just being able to talk to the supervisor and say, I need assistance with making that role clarity, setting those boundaries. This is not my role. My boundary is that I don't do the phones because I'm not an office assistant. And I'm saying it maybe in a little bit of a direct, way, but there's of course ways that you can say it in a more diplomatic way, right? I feel like when you were communicating, you were saying you were communicating in a great way, great tone. I wouldn't change anything about it, right? Like, you know, the two of you were great volunteers. I really, really appreciate it. So I would add that youth peer meetings, right? I can't put good. You know, a youth peer meeting would be a great way to debrief on that too. Because in this scenario, it kind of, you know, it seems like this youth peer advocate in the scenario is kind of isolated in the sense like they're the youth peer advocate and they're around other people that aren't youth peer advocates. Sometimes you need to connect with another youth peer advocate. So that was just one more thing that I would suggest on top of that. But thank you so much for your contributions, Emma, Angel. Again, eternal gratitude. Any other final thoughts? Any additional things that anybody wanted to add? Um, oh, last question. Okay. Angel said, what if a youth has a crisis and asks for their youth peer advocate? Okay, so we're going back into that. That is a good question. Again, the boundary setting. Um, this is how, in the past, like I said, I've worked in a residential setting. This is how in the past I and my, fellow youth peer advocates at that agency have had to deal with it of these staff are trained. They're given training to deal with these crises. They can handle the crisis. They are supposed to handle the crisis. You're not crisis at the end of the day. The staff should be trained to talk to the youth and say, when you are available, like when, let's figure this out first. Let's talk about this first, you and I. And then, whatever we talk about, of course we can talk to, just Angel. Of course we can talk to Angel afterwards. Of course, like the staff are supposed to be in charge of that. That's their job description. That's what they're being paid for. That's their role. And I think that there's also this kind of, as I've mentioned a few times, there's this like real deep desire to help. So as youth peer advocates, we can very often get caught in the, people say, like that was what the scenario was. Oh, they like you, like this person really likes to spend time with you and you connect really well with them. Why don't you help? And that's it's like I appreciate the fact that we connect very well. But it takes away the fidelity of the role. It takes away from honestly your trust in the youth. And the trust and the youth's trust in you and being able to connect in that crisis debrief, giving the tools, the skills to advocate next time. That's not your role. I'm not even I'm sitting there and I'm saying it because I'm very passionate about it, that it's like, youth peer advocates should not be dragged into a situation that makes them uncomfortable with being able to do their own job. So I really appreciate you asking all these questions, Angel, more than you know. It's really good information, and I think it could be really helpful to other youth peer advocates as well. Unique, you have your hand up. Thanks for your patience.
Of course. No, I can just relate to scenario number two. As a previous advocate, I was always pulled in different directions that totally had nothing to do with my job description as an advocate for the family. So I can relate, and I would literally just like set boundaries or ask for like small group meetings with like my directors to just clarify like the job description, and I realized it it was a lot of like understaffing with my company, so that's why we were pulled in different directions. So I'm like, maybe companies being understaffed has something to do with like them having like YPAs do like clerical work or like administration or FPAs and stuff. So I can just relate with this scenario.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And that's like that being understaffed. It's true. It's kind of a pitfall that I wish that I had added in a different, slide. So I appreciate you bringing that up because it's true. You end up kind of getting pulled in different directions because it's like, oh, you're part of the team. We're part of the team. That's some of the things that we have to do, whatever. And I think that, it kind of goes back to boundaries too. And maybe, as a youth peer advocate, okay, like, this is, something very simple, right? I know today's a busy day. Okay, it's a busy day, and this is not within my role. And also, I don't have any other work to do right now, so I don't mind, putting my effort into this for, you know, whatever it is, 5 minutes. But please, at the end of the day, understand this isn't my role. This is me just kind of almost like putting myself out there, and yes, being a little bit, and I wouldn't even really recommend this, especially not on a regular basis, because you don't want people to kind of, you give an inch and they take a mile and such like that. But at the end of the day, if you know it's not your role, and you have all these different resources to 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 kind of prove your point, to kind of drive it home. That's not my role. And that's not something that I should be expected to do.
Of course,
Um,
of course. And it's okay to say no. In a
yes, I'm saying yes.
respectful in a respectful way, not necessarily telling them no, but just, like, kindly, like, "This is not a part of my job description." Although, at times, if you do have time, you can support where it's needed, you know? Because I had no issue with supporting, when anyone needed support, even in the classrooms or do it in events, I'm always available. I'll make time.
And that's the great thing, right? That's true. Is as long as you're able to continue to maintain, your responsibilities and your description and what you have to do for the youth. Of course, it's like we're all human. We help out where we can and such like that. And I do want to appreciate you kind of coming, reiterating the sort of tone and sort of trying to be mindful of the fact that people are going through things because it's people are understaffed. There's high tensions, and so sometimes you have to kind of handle it in a way that you know empathetic, and
Right.
being understanding.
And it's temporary. So I was just like, it's not a permanent thing. The understaffing.
Yes, yes. So thank you so much. And like I said, you brought up something that was not on my slide, so thank you for adding something. Um, So some questions for reflection as we're getting, we've finished these scenarios, we've had these conversations. What resources, and if I can hear from, it doesn't, you don't have to unmute, you can put it in the chat, whatever. But if I can hear from people that are not the two volunteers that went, what resources do you think that you'll benefit from in general? If we're going back to, the toolboxes, that slide of remedies, what are some things you feel like you'd actually utilize? And if you want to share other resources, please feel free to do so. More than welcome. Like personally, as a youth peer advocate, when I was working in that direct sort of role, I'll say that the resources I think that I benefited from, or I wish that I would have been able to attend more technical assistance calls. That's true. Something that I wish I could have done. I had a conflict at the time that I was, direct service. But one of the things that I found to be really helpful was intentional supervision. The person who was supervising me, at my previous agency was somebody who had been a peer themselves. So that was a super big resource, for me. And this was a person also that in all my different roles, if I was in a specific role that maybe I was supervised by somebody who was outside of the peer role, that supervisor I had, in different roles was also a co-supervisor for me. That's kind of the way that the youth peer advocate program worked out in my old agency. Um, I see. Okay, so unique benefited from trainings. Yes, and there was all those resources for the trainings and things like that. So, and if we need to, go over them again, which the ones they are, where they are, we can. Teresa says I benefit from attending different trainings, events and trainings as well. Yes, Yes, and there is a conference coming up, so please, that will be at the end of the slideshow. I'll show y'all, how to look into that. My supervisor meetings, bi-weekly or weekly, that's what Peyton says. Yes, checking in with supervisors, getting that, guidance, direction, and even sometimes, educating them too. You got all this information from this technical assistance call, bring it back to them. If it's helpful for them, it's helpful for you. Angel says to look for the peer tact because I didn't know about it. That's okay. Not enough people know about it. That's why we're talking about it. It's a good resource. I want to attend more youth peer advocate trainings, understand my role better, as I am the only youth peer advocate in my system. Perfect. That's what this is all for, right? All these families together events are for people that don't have those connections. Super super big. There will be a bunch of QR codes at the end of the slideshow that you can scan and you can get yourself registered for all the different things. Peyton says these trainings, thank you, Jay. You're welcome. I'm glad to be of help. And then, yes, also learning from other youth peer advocates. I was very, very fortunate that at my previous agency, there was a mentorship program because we had enough youth peer advocates to do so. And so, what Teresa says, learning from other youth peer advocates, that was big. I was a mentor, though. I wasn't a mentee, but even as a mentor, I learned so much from the people that I mentored too. It was kind of like a reciprocal thing. But the youth peer meetings is also another thing, another place that you can learn from other youth peer advocates. So just reiterating that. Emma, I'm really enjoying attending youth peer meetings and TA calls. I'm the only YPA in my office, so it's awesome to connect with others. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for kind of putting all that out there, sharing all your opinions and everything like that. That is community building. That's on community. We love it. Now we're going to just kind of briefly skim over Code of Ethics violations. They're not common, truly, but they happen. So I just kind of want to put it out there, get a little bit of information. I'm not going to go over it too much. I also do want to say that there's a few updates that need to happen, like things being put on the website and stuff. I'm not sure if they've been done already, so I haven't added them as like links or anything like that, but that, is something to look out for if you need assistance with this, right? So when a violation is reported, the case is reviewed by the Youth Peer Advocate Credential Advisory Committee. It was just renamed, so I think, what was it? YPSAC, I think was the last acronym for it. So it just changed to this new acronym. It's just been renamed. You can report Code of Ethics violations by emailing ypacredential@ftnys.org with the subject line YPA COE confidential. So when Code of Ethics is violated, when a violation is reported, the case is reviewed by the YPA CAC. Here are some of the possible consequences, and I, don't bring this up in order, like in kind of a way to scare you, but it actually, my point actually in bringing this up is more the understanding that things happen and that the purpose of families together and all this credentialing process and all this continuing education is to also, when there's a code of ethics violation, make sure that people are able to like rise up from that, like and be able to be better youth peer advocates, or to restore their confidence in being a youth peer advocate. It's not the end all be all type of thing, right? So written caution, warning, suspension, revocation. It's not like you're going to go into there and then, like they revoke it immediately. Like there's a process to it. And that's like a big reason that, learning about the code of ethics is really important, so that you're kind of like on that, mindset. And this is what I was saying before. The purpose of the Code of Ethics consequences are meant to be corrective. So they usually also include educational, supervisory, training and or treatment requirements in combination with sanctions or corrective actions. So again, kind of making the point that, sometimes people just really need a lot of extra support. That's everybody. So it will come, and it's being reviewed by YPA, CAC. There's a whole process that kind of goes into it. Um, and that's really it. That's kind of the bottom line. Just kind of bringing it up. Um, so the question for reflection that I got for you before we wrap up is, why do you think that the code of ethics is so important? Which I kind of already asked at the beginning, but just consider what it means for our work as youth peer advocates. So if you want to maybe, like, if you already answered at the beginning something kind of similar, has your perspective changed maybe, or do you have more to add based on what we've gone through?
I think the code of ethics is important because it kind of it helps with the boundaries. It helps to like be more like specific, and then there's also like examples of what that looks like. And it's not only like to protect us, but also informing us how to appropriately help to advocate for others and what that can look like, and sort of that breakdown. And so it's like a mutual kind of respect system.
Yes, I appreciate using the word respect too, like really, being able to respect each other, respect our roles, respect the youth, for sure. And to make sure we're respected too. I mean, I'm like a kind of a, you know, the type of person that gets like very passionate about the things, but it is true. Reciprocal respect. Any others? I did see Peyton say, keeps everyone safe in professional boundary setting and youth and family driven care. Yes, 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 yes. Safety and boundaries, for sure. And just keeping in mind, too, there's no one right answer. Like it says on the slide, you know, it's a lot of reasons that the code of ethics are important, and they might be important to different people for different reasons. Okay, so I am now opening it up. We have about 20 minutes, and I do want to make sure that I go through, all the upcoming events and resources and things. So maybe like 5-10 minutes of just like, if you want to ask some questions, get some answers from other people, share your experiences and things like that. If it's something that you're maybe not comfortable sharing in this big setting, I have a few minutes to stay back afterwards. Any Families Together staff could stay back afterwards. Thank you, Uni. Thank you, Angel. And if you, like I said, if y'all think of anything, um, okay, thank you for being here, Angel, and thanks for your participation. Everybody was great, by the way, with the participation. I really was very impressed, and I really appreciate it. People made the participation efforts for where they're at and what they're able to. So thank you so much. I'm gonna move forward. Actually, like I said, I'll stay back for a bit, if necessary. If anybody has any questions, that maybe they don't want to share, or they come up with the next few minutes. Sometimes people need time to process it. I feel it. I'm like that too. So upcoming events. This is the next TA call. In honor of Autism Acceptance Month, I'm going to be doing a neurodivergence in youth serving systems presentation, and it's going to come with a panel with a few panelists that have, been working with me on different questions and things like that, ways to share their experience. So please join us at 11:30 a.m. on April 17th for a brief presentation. So there will be a little bit of information and informative stuff, and Q&A about neurodivergence in youth serving systems. We will explore how neurodivergence is often overlooked co-occurring disability for some of the youths that we serve. So a youth might be in the mental health system, foster care system, juvenile justice system, all sorts of things. And they also have a neurodivergent diagnosis that isn't considered a mental health diagnosis, say autism, ADHD, dyslexia, Tourette's syndrome, and that those symptoms are overlooked or not attended to. So we'll provide a brief overview of neurodivergence, and you'll get to hear from some YPAs or people with experience as neurodivergent people in youth serving systems that have relevant lived experience. We will also be facilitating that Q&A space and sharing resources. Okay. So here are the QR codes that I was talking about earlier. You can scan the QR codes, go to these links, and register yourself for these events. You got the TA trainings, youth peer meetings, the supervisor experience cafe. Just please keep in mind that it's supervisor only. We are going to update these flyers to kind of reflect that and make this youth peer advocate specific. But if you want to take a picture, send it to your supervisor. That's like what we've been talking about, right? So please feel free to do so. This is actually how to become part of the YPA CAC that I was talking about earlier when we were talking about violations. So this is a way to be a part of it. You can scan the QR code for the interest form at the bottom if you were interested in that. And here is the QR code specifically for youth peer meetings. You can, like I said, just take a screenshot, scan the QR code, whatever you need to do to get yourself registered in these things and attend these things as you need to or want to. So just if you wanted to try to get onto this annual conference, it's going to be on May 4th and 5th of this year. Save the date, put it in your calendar, and there will be some information about registration going out soon in the newsletters. I appreciate the feedback in the chat telling me how I did. I love feedback. I'm trying to grow, right? We're all trying to grow, so I appreciate feedback so I can give the best technical assistance to y'all. So if you want to go and just tell me how I did, use the survey. And I think Zaquana, if you could just put it in the chat real quick as well so that people could just click the link, or you can type it in from what's on the slide. That would be greatly appreciated. And like I said, feedback's great. It doesn't always have to be positive. I mean, no one's perfect. So please let me know what I can do different or if I should keep doing what I'm doing. Or both. I don't know. So thank you for being here. If you want to connect, that is my personal email. I would recommend going through, not personal email, I'm sorry, my professional email that is specifically for me. But the Youth Peer Advocate credential, YPA credential at ftnys.org. If you have a general question about just like anything like TA calls or your credential or anything like that, it's probably better for you to just go through YPA credential at ftnys.org. But if there was something, specific question for me or something like that, you can use my specific email. And if I feel like other people can answer your question, I can always loop in other people. So thanks so much for being here. This was a great turnout. And I hope that y'all have a wonderful day. I am going to be staying on, unless everybody leaves, I'm going to be staying on until 1 o'clock to answer any questions. Thank you. and we can stop the recording, right?